open this month, but that's now been postponed until after the election. But the plan is that there will be a draft new code given consideration in the early autumn, and further feedback and opportunities for members to consider the impact of what that would look like. But at this stage, we need to be exploring actually what it is that members, how they would want to change it, whether or not they would like the LGA wholesale or perhaps adopt the LGA with some tweaks to it, which is what some local authorities are doing. But ultimately, the plan is that a new code of conduct would be presented, or proposed code of conduct would be presented to Council Assembly in March of next year, with a view to it commencing probably in the new municipal year. So that's just a very brief outline, and I'm happy to assist or answer any questions that there might be, members might have.
Any questions to Sarah on our work on the Code of Conduct?
Thank you, Chair. Could you talk a little bit more about the benchmarking exercise? I think you said that the benchmarking was against other London councils. Was any benchmarking conducted with councils outside the city?
So the benchmarking that we've done is only in relation to other London boroughs, and in fact what that showed was that it was broadly split. 16, I think it was 16 other London boroughs, and I'll just make sure I'm accurate. 16 London boroughs had not adopted it, and 15 had. So it's quite finely kind of balanced between those boroughs, but we haven't gone outside of London.
Could I ask what the thinking was behind that decision?
In terms of not going outside of London? Yeah. It was just very much to look at what was going on in the London borough area. I think it's a question of time and just sort of sampling, this is what's happening in London. So we could go more broadly.
Yeah, and I think in London, because they're all London boroughs, they're very like for like. Once you start going out of London, you start to have unitaries, you start having district councils, so you start to get a very different mix. And we thought it was good to just compare with some of our neighbours. London being a relatively small place, but with 30 odd boroughs in it, we thought it was just interesting to see who had gone wholesale, who had adopted the code. What we weren't able to identify in our benchmarking were those who had wholesalely, literally just lifted and shifted the model code, and those who had actually taken the model code and made localised tweaks to it. Our benchmarking didn't go down into that level of detail, but I was actually quite surprised it was the almost 50-50 split. And then when we've drilled down and spoken to some authorities a bit more, people have adopted different approaches. Some authorities have just done it quite quickly and then had to go back and make changes. Others have taken it through a more detailed process. But yeah, it was really very much for us to say to members we're not out of kilter with what is going on across London more generally.
Okay. Can we move on to member experience now? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I've just put up a very short presentation here, which I know has been handed round to members, just to give an overview of the work that we've been doing on the member experience working group. So this group was established last month, and the purpose of that really is to look at some of the recommendations that came out of the Corporate Peer Challenge in January, and to look at the work that we need to do as officers to really improve the experience of our members, both around member support and around member inquiries. We thought it was important that we engaged members in that, in both designing the service and how the service might work. And so in order to achieve that, we have set up a working group. So I'm just going to very briefly cover in my presentation the role, the design principles for the service, because I think it's important that we're really clear about what we're designing, so that we can do a bit of QA against that. The workshops that we undertook with members during May, and the feedback that we've had, which has been very interesting, and I think very much welcome that feedback, which was really honest and very constructive. And then I'm going to just look a bit more at next steps for both member inquiries, member communications, and a councillor support hub that we are proposing to set up over the course of the next couple of weeks. And again, we'll briefly touch on benchmarking and then just some key milestones that we're committed to meeting over the next couple of months. So in terms of the first slide, please. So this is why we're here. What we're doing is, are you able to flick that on for me, Virginia? Thank you. So the Member Experience Programme has come out of the recommendations from the Corporate Peer Challenge. And as a result of those recommendations, what we needed to do was there needed to be a rapid improvement for member inquiries. We needed to develop a new member support function, member support service. We used to have that in the past, but we haven't had more recently. Members wanted better information on member inquiries and the performance and the trends. So very much talking about running member inquiries rather than it just being a process, but running it as an important part of our governance so that we can see the trends and analysis and what our residents are saying to members, and therefore what us as officers need to be responding to. Enhancing the quality assurance process for member inquiries. You'll see from some of the feedback I'm going to touch on shortly that has been variable. And to bring member inquiries process and handling into the governance of the organisation. And, CMT are receiving reports on member inquiries on a quarterly basis, and chief officers will also be having that information at hand. So that's what the Corporate Peer Challenge set out. Those were the actions that we needed to take. So if I could go on to the next slide, please, Virginia. So here we are. Here's the Member Officer Working Group. So I've listed there the councillors who are part of that group, and Councillor Newens is there, and also Councillor Simmons, who is kindly co-chairing with myself, I think. So that's the group. We met, we've had 2 meetings so far. We've had some webinars. What we're going to do is to prioritise the improvement work, and the key deliverables for our group is to deliver and sign off the improvement plan for member inquiries, to feed into an enhanced assurance process for member inquiries, and to develop the new member support function. So those are the 3 things that as a group we need to deliver by the end of this project, admitting that some of the work around members' inquiries will still be work in progress. I don't think we'll crack that all at once, but we'll certainly have a plan to make it better. Can I have the next slide, please? In terms of the design principles, I think it's important whenever you're embarking on a service redesign or you're putting forward a proposal to do things differently, so that you think about what's going to guide you within that. What are the principles that you need to be coming back to that you can check against to say, well, did we get there? And how do we demonstrate that? So I think the approach has to be digital. I think we need to use in digital because it's efficient. That's the way that we work now. But I think it also needs to be digitally inclusive, being conscious that there are some members who may not be as digitally agile as others. And certainly we can help and train up, but we need to make sure we've got a service that works for everyone. It needs to be flexible and member-focused, and it needs to be efficient, and it needs to deliver value for money. So what we're not proposing to do is to have whole new teams of people, coming in to do this work. We should be able to deliver this service within the existing resources that we have and demonstrate best value. It needs to be responsive, so we need to have more timely communications, and it needs to give a resolution focus. I think what's clearly been happening, particularly with member inquiries, is that you're not really getting a resolution. Things keep going round in the system, and there's a lack of ownership and clarity in that respect. And I think the service needs to be high quality, it needs to be adaptable, it needs to be able to respond to the feedback from members, and it needs to be member-centric. So those are the design principles we put to both the webinar working groups and to the member officer working group, and we didn't get any pushback from that, so I think we're likely to adopt that as our way of working as we move forward.
Can I suggest, in terms of timeliness, Doreen, would it be okay for members to look at the feedback? It's very, very good really report on the feedback here, but could we move on to next steps?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So if members have got any comments on the feedback, yes. Yeah, do let me know. And so I've provided there the feedback that we've had from members in terms of both member inquiries, member communications and the member support function. But in terms of just next steps and where we go next, we want to set up the Councillor Support Hub. That will be done in June. There'll be a dedicated inbox, and that's been put in place now as I speak, and I'll be communicating that. We've looked at some benchmarking. You'll see that all authorities have some form of member support function. Some include member inquiries within the member support function, but we thought that benchmarking information was important to share with members. And then in terms of next steps, what we've been doing is in May we've been having the workshops, so we've completed those. During June, we went into the pre-election period. We had some meetings planned for June, but obviously we'll have to postpone those now. But there's certainly been this update to Audit Governance and Standards, which I'm doing today. We will have a draft of the Councillor Support Function to bring to the Member Officer Working Group, and the Rapid Improvement Plan for Member Inquiries will be further detailed, and that will be ready to be presented to members in July when we all come back after the elections. And what we'll be doing there is looking to go live and testing some of those changes in the system with a small group of members, particularly around the council support function. And then during August, there'll be more opportunity to really work with members on what we've designed. We're looking at a very detailed comms proposal for members as well, and we'll be wanting members to sign that off together with a dedicated SharePoint page where we can upload and have current and recent information that members would like to have. And then by September, we hope to have all actions completed and these systems and processes all up and running, and better quality control in terms of member inquiries more generally.
Thank you very much, Doreen. It's a very much appreciated piece of work that you'll be doing and carrying on for us, with us, to improve this much needed service. Any questions for Doreen? Margie? Michael?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. I was going to ask, is there any, I mean, what is the, are there additional financial resources being put against this work?
We have a programme manager that's just assisting us with the programming of the work, so that resource has been brought in. But other than that, the work's been led by myself and staff across the council. And in terms of when we set up the new system, member support system, I'm convinced we can do that from existing resources.
Thank you.
Michael?
Thank you very much for the update and report. It feels certainly that a lot of work has gone into where we are at the moment. In addition to kind of some of the kind of problems with the current setup of members' inquiries, probably the more difficult aspect is the kind of emergency situation when things need to be addressed literally today. Does this new system kind of, would that solve that? Because I always feel helpless as a councillor when there is an urgent inquiries itself.
I absolutely agree, and that was one of the really key messages that came out, both urgent inquiries and complex cases. And I think we need to have really clear definitions for both of those. You know, what would normally constitute an urgent inquiry, what would constitute a complex case, and I think they need to follow a different route. I think what we would, I'm talking off the top of my head now, but, I think we'd be saying where something is urgent, like, needing a response within 24, 48 hours, I think that should go to a named dedicated officer in the department in which we think the urgency needs to be dealt with. And that's part of ensuring that all departments have a key lead for member inquiries, a bit like Chidi was saying how we have for the departmental coordinators, and I think that those leads also need to sit very close to the strategic directors, not physically, but very entwined in their departments. So we will be doing that absolutely, because I think that will provide a better service both to members and to our residents.
Thank you. Do you want to move on to the next topic?
And then finally, members, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the elections. Obviously, we have a general election on the 4th of July, and we also have 2 by-elections in Southwark, in Faraday and Rye Lane wards. It's a bit of an unprecedented year for elections across the globe. There's something like 1.2 billion people going to the polls during 2024, and I'm not sure we've seen a year quite like this, including America, Mexico, Pakistan, South Africa, India, USA. So it's very much, this is where the kind of global politics and the global world feels that, leads into to nationally and then locally. So we do have these 2 by-elections and the general election. We started the pre-election period on the 31st of May, so that was last Friday. So the council is in now a heightened level of sensitivity around what it can discuss. Just those rules, there's been detailed guidance issued to staff and to all members so that everybody's on the same page. But in short, we shouldn't use council material or resources to promote a political group. We shouldn't be posting images of candidates on our council-headed paper. We should avoid using social media to share political posts or opinions about candidates in the elections or to influence views. And council resources shouldn't be used to facilitate political groups. We will be in this heightened period of pre-election until 10 o'clock on the 4th of July when the polls close. That's when you can have all the reporting in the press. In relation to the 2 by-elections that we have, certainly in those wards there'll be even more sensitivity. So my team will be looking at events and activities in those 2 wards where we have by-election, and we'll be advising. It's always a difficult balance, isn't it? Because we don't want to be shutting down the council. The only time we shut down, so to speak, is when we have all-out locals, and there's very good reasons for that. So we're working, treading that fine balance between keeping things going, making sure that events that can reasonably go ahead, and those that need to be cancelled are cancelled or rescheduled. We've already been through the list of meetings. Some of those have been postponed or they've been reduced in terms of numbers of items on the agenda. And those will be rescheduled after the elections on the 4th of July. Generally, we've just come out of the GLAs, so we're well versed at this, I must say. We've barely had time to recover from the last election, but we're into another one. But I think the team that advise members, working with the constitutional team, we're all really experienced at doing this. And if we give a bit of advice that seems a bit not quite there, there's always the ability to push back or to refer to myself or anyone else in my team for further guidance. Haven't identified a major issue. So that's where we are. Just a couple of broad issues about the elections. The acting returning officer is Althea as the chief exec. She has appointed 3 deputies with full powers, which is myself, Clive and Fran. This week is nominations, so this week Fran is very busy getting all the nominations for both the general elections and the by-elections in. The closing date and time for nominations is the 7th of June at 4:00 p.m. They must all be delivered here to the head of elections by then. So that's the main time pressure this week. We have 2 constituencies, as everyone knows, in Southwark, which is Bermondsey and Old Southwark and Peckham. The count will be here at Tooley Street as normal. It's an overnight count. Legislation requires that we count overnight, and we'll also be doing the by-elections as well on the same night overnight. I am responsible for the count venue, so if this building doesn't work on the 4th of July, it will be me that everyone's after. But no, seriously, working with a large team of officers and Clive and Fran and everyone, so the count will be here. For those of you who have been here for a while and remember the locals, it's basically taking up all of this ground floor. We've been very successful as a local authority in promoting postal voting, just to say. I think something like 40,000, but don't quote me because Fran will tell me I've got it wrong. But we did have a real push on postal votes during COVID, and we have significantly increased the number of postal votes. There'll be voter ID, but we've all done that already in polling stations. We had that at the GLAs. There wasn't any significant impact as far as we are aware. And just finally, a couple of things that I'd say is just that it takes over 700 staff to run an election here. I mean, we all see bits of the process in terms of, we may see the polling station staff, we may see the count staff, we may see the triage staff, but without everybody really chipping in to get involved in delivering democracy, we wouldn't be able to do it. It is the biggest event that the council undertakes. And I think we do it very well here in Southwark. We're fortunate to have very experienced staff and senior and junior staff who get involved, and I'm hoping it will be a very successful night, building on the experience we've had of using this building and working with our candidates and agents that we've had over many years.
Any questions for Doreen? Margie, Michael.
Thank you. I'm conscious that you said that you have 2 parliamentary constituencies in Southwark, and obviously parts of Southwark are not in either of those 2 constituencies, including the part in which I live. So I was wondering. I mean, obviously, so those will be the 2 counts that are taking place at Tooley Street. Is there sort of a formal process for determining which borough is responsible for which parliamentary constituencies? Is it about the I mean, I think, for example, the one that I'm in, Dulwich and West Norwood, I'm not sure under the boundary changes, but I would assume, same as previously, has a larger portion of Lambeth than Southwark. Is it to do with the proportion, or is it just sort of divvied up on a fairly random basis?
With all the boundary changes now that have happened, so this parliamentary election would be the first one on the new boundary changes. Historically, Lambeth has always counted that end of the borough. So we've only been 2 main constituencies. Interestingly, I was having a conversation with Fran the other day, and I think we moved from 3 MPs covering Southwark to something like 6 because of the boundary changes, because we give away bits around the edges. So this also links into the bit about member inquiries, about getting that right, because we're going to have more members actually coming to us around member inquiries for our constituents. In terms of those ballot boxes on the night, they will go off to Lambeth for counting, or Lewisham, or wherever. So although the polling station, we may have staff there, those ballot boxes will go across to the other boroughs. I think we're fortunate that our by-elections are not in any of the constituencies that cut across the new parliamentary boundaries, because that would be a challenge. So, but it's one for Fran and myself and Nalth here and Clive to think about in future, because I think if we could then got a ward that crossed the boundaries, and then we've got the constituency boundaries, I think that would be quite a challenge. I think you may end up probably deciding to go for a local count, but then you've got to have verification in case there are things in the wrong boxes, so it could become difficult.
Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thanks for the presentation on that, and thanks to your team as well for the wonderful work done leading up to the mayoral and at the mayoral itself. One of the things that I've still picked up is that there are still some members of our community who haven't got the right ID, who pretty much close to election day felt like it was too late. It'll be really useful to hear from you as to what figures came back from the mayoral as to people who were turned away from polling stations across Southwark, and also secondly, how long does it take for us? My understanding is residents can apply directly for ID. How quickly can we turn around that ID? Is it a week, 2 weeks? Or, because it will be really useful so that when we're out speaking to the community, we can give them an idea. If they apply today, can they get it within a week itself? Taking into account postal delays as well, of course.
No, that's really helpful. I don't have the figures for the GLA elections and how many people are turned away, and presumably we'll get that at some point because they do the analysis if they know it, because obviously you take a log of who may have come in, and some people may come in, recognise they haven't got the ID, go away and bring it back. Others may go away and not come back. So I don't have any figures for that. in relation to applying for a voter registration certificate, I can ask Fran to give us the deadline dates for that, because I don't have that with me at the moment. I can very happily just circulate that. There's a timetable that we've got. I haven't got it here with me tonight, but that will give you the deadline dates for the voter registration certificate. I think they turn them around quite quickly, within about 5 or 6 days. But when you've got everyone busy, because it's all done digitally and you've got to provide the documentation and you've got to have access to digital, I think it can get quite difficult. So I certainly will ask Fran about that. Have you got the date there, Virginia?
To apply for a photo ID to vote, voter authority certificate, you need to apply by 5 p.m. on the 26th of June 2024.
There you go. So there's the date. So, but we can get some better comms out on that as well. And I think there's also another real challenge for anyone running elections, which is overseas voters. You always get a lot of people from overseas who want to vote. And the timelines around overseas voters and to get their postal ballot out to them and then back in is always a challenge. And then proxy voting, we're going to have I think we've got at least 3 or 4 people who'll be doing proxy votes this time round. We expect it to be a high turnout election. And so we need to staff up the proxy vote team. So we're currently training up more people to be able to do that now. So, yeah.
Yes, just I'll be grateful if you can ask whether you or Fran to just, maybe not now, but later on, send the figures through in terms of the percentage of, or how many people were turned away across Southwark, because it'll be useful to know whether there is an issue that we need to address or whether it's just on a small scale. Thank you.
Well done. Nick?
Thank you, Chair. Michael, you actually asked the question I was going to ask. Just to reiterate that, it will be really helpful to see those statistics when we get them.
Definitely try and get hold of them, Chair, get Fran to send them round.
Thank you. Andy?
There seems to be some confusion amongst officers about meetings with councillors, and I've had to battle through today and manage to convince officers that the advice they were giving me was wrong and that they were allowed to meet with councillors not in the public or not with members of the public. But I did ask you, and I'm not sure I've got clarity on this, about the housing area forums where councillors are expected to attend, but they are in the public domain, and officers are being advised they shouldn't be attending meeting with councillors and members of the public. So should those meetings be pulled? Because we will clearly get complaints if we don't turn up to meetings where we're expected to be there.
It's an interesting one, Andy, because I would say if you go through the rules, and Sarah and her team are also giving advice on this, straightforward housing area forum. We're not having any candidates in the election. We're not expecting any MPs to be turning up or any of our members who may be candidates. We don't know all the candidates yet because close of nominations is not until Friday. So I'm talking about, people that we know have declared. I would always take a common sense view about it. So I had quite a tricky one last week, which was in relation to a planning matter that was controversial during the GLAs, and I had a chat with Clive about it and the departments, and on balance, I felt it could go ahead. So on balance, those housing area forums, they're local issues, they could go ahead, but without me knowing the detailed facts, it's difficult for me to give a definitive answer here, but they are broadly our business. Residents are expecting them to happen, no doubt. Housing is a controversial issue, but it's still part of our statutory functions that we need to do and that we need to deliver. So being cautious there, but I can see reasons why they could go ahead, and I can also see reasons why there might be an advice that they are cancelled. But I think it's always important, if the officers are pushing back to you, then they should be having a chat with my team, because we do tend to take quite a pragmatic approach, I think, Sarah, don't we?
So if I just come back on some examples. So officers in housing told me this morning they couldn't meet with myself and my fellow ward colleague behind closed doors just with us. So I've had to spend a lot of time pushing them to say, this is nonsense, and yes, you can meet with us. officers in highways say that they are not allowed to meet with councillors and members of the public. So, for example, doing a walkabout looking at, I don't know, pedestrian crossing or whatever. So 3 parts of the council apparently taking completely randomly different approaches. And in the case of the Housing Area Forum, it's housing management taking one view, community resident involvement within housing taking a completely different, diametrically opposed view. So what's the route forward for getting clarity on this?
The route forward, Andy, is to tell whoever officers is leading that to have a chat with me and my team. Because we will give the correct, sensible advice that is required. On the highways and streets and streets and so forth, I know that we have become involved in certain quite controversial areas in certain part of the borough about not doing anything in this pre-election period, but I think we've come to that view through some very sensible conversations. But we've not said you can't do a walkabout about this or that. You know, we've not got down to that level of granular detail. So very happy to, if you ask the officers to contact Sarah Nagler or myself tomorrow, then we will hopefully be able to get a resolution to this. You know, we need to take a sensible approach, but certainly a meeting with, you know, ward members and officers seems to me perfectly reasonable that it can take place. None of them are candidates in the election. We don't even know who the candidates are until Friday.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you. This is for the committee. Are there any actions that we wish to take coming out of this conversation? We've already asked that Doreen supplies the figures for the number of people turned away at polling stations. Is there any other action that we would like to come out of this conversation? It doesn't have to be, if there are.
In terms of the members' inquiries, do we know when the next update will be, or is it just when it's implemented?
Barry, I'm happy to come back in at the next meeting to give a rolling update in terms of where we are. So is it September, June, July? July would be too soon, maybe the one after that. November, but in the interim, I think we should have a draft. We'll probably have a draft code of conduct by November, actually, for the committee to look at. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Now come on to item 7, internal audit, annual report and annual statement of assurance. Interim. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Aaron Winter. I'm from BDO. We are the internal auditors, and I'm the Chief Audit Executive.
And you're presenting 2 reports to us tonight?
I am indeed, yes.
I'd like to start. Thank you.
Okay. So the first report of the pack is our Head of Internal Audit Opinion and Annual Report. I will flag that it's an interim report because we're still completing our work from 23-24, but that is substantially complete, enabling us to bring this to you. And our timetable is in line with prior years where we bring our final report to the July Audit Committee, Audit Governance Standards Committee, sorry. So in terms of the opinion, it covers all of the work we've completed to date, and it is there to provide an opinion over the operational and design control effectiveness. Given the volume of work we've done, you can see that it gives a wide variety of coverage across the key areas of the council. It's a risk-based plan, as you would expect. So therefore, there are some assurance opinions that do come out in a slightly negative, limited opinions. But in comparison to prior years, you can see that they're pretty consistent in terms of the outcomes that we're providing through our work. With not too many fluctuations in the limited assurance opinions, and there are quite a few substantial and moderate assurance opinions. And what that does result in is a moderate assurance overall opinion. And we're not expecting that to change between now and when we report our final pieces of work and report to you in July. The final aspect I will just flag is the follow-up audit recommendations and obviously management's responsiveness to that. So you'll see there that we're around 90%. That is a slight decrease on prior years, but there has been a big push in the last couple of months to get as many done as possible. And that is also taking into account management's acceptance of our recommendations and the willingness to take them forward. So in all, that was all I was going to say about that report, and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for your report. Do members have any questions? Andy?
So thanks very much for that. Disappointing we've dropped a couple of percent. Gives us something to aim for during the year. Page 25 of our report, page 14 of your report, talks about instances where the turnaround of draft reports was slow. How might that be addressed? Is it helpful if you provide us with a summary of slow turnarounds at committee meetings, or how can we help you to make sure that that doesn't continue?
So as part of our progress report, we do have our KPIs at the back, and if we are having any issues, we would flag the particular reviews where we've not met that target, or where management haven't met that target, I should say. We do have an escalation process where we obviously go up to the relevant directors, etc., and involve them, and that tends to then enable us to use that as leverage to get that response quicker. So I think what we can do is, if we are having any difficulties as part of our progress reporting, we should be flagging those specific ones that we've had difficulties with, and therefore we can take action as a result.
Thanks, Chair. That will be a suggestion for action, that we just formally request that, but I've got no other comments at this stage.
Thank you. Any further comments on this report or questions? No? Okay, thank you. So we'd like to have an action on this report, which is for any of those BDO reports that are very slow providing the information to come back to this committee. Yeah.
In a summary form.
In a summary form, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Chair, what you've done in the past is invite the officers or management who
Yeah.
would be giving those responses to attend audit governance and standards if they haven't given a response within a reasonable time frame.
Yeah.
Is that something that you'd like to follow up with?
I don't think with all of them. I think in the past we've kind of identified the ones that were the most outstanding, and brought people along. And you may remember, Aaron, it did make people seem to take it a little bit more seriously, even though you've gone up the senior management line. So I think at this stage, Andy, we're only asking for the list rather than to come to us for consideration. Yeah, and then we can choose where we go from there. Yeah.
If it helps, the
Yes.
information is there at a high level in our KPIs, but
Right.
what we can do is be a bit more specific with the examples, so it can become an ongoing action on us to report. But I'd like to
Yeah.
think that we don't
Yes.
get to that.
No, sure. We understand. We just want to help, and we do want to improve those KPIs. Thank you. Nick.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you for the report. One question. On parking management and estates management parking, we've got limited for both design and operational effectiveness. I just wanted to understand what was driving that. You did mention briefly that limited was not quite what it necessarily implied, but could you expand on that a little bit?
So what we do, and you'll see in our progress report, is we do bring summaries of those reports to the Audit Committee, Audit and Governance Standards Committee, on a quarterly basis. So that was one that we previously reported to the committee, hence why the detail's not in this report. But ultimately we found higher profile findings in line with our kind of definitions, that there are issues with the controls, that they're not designed effectively to mitigate the risks. I haven't got the detail in front of me, but obviously I could go back into previous reports that we've provided. But from memory, the fundamental kind of management of the parking arrangements weren't operating as expected, and therefore we had to obviously outline a limited opinion as a result. And what then we've done is suggested the improvement actions to provide the assurance against the risks that we raised. So limited means that there were a number of high and medium findings as a result.
And those recommended changes are in a separate report, or have I missed them in here?
Yes, so they would have been in a previous report to the AGS committee. Probably from memory, I think it may have been part of the February meeting, but I can dig that detail out and share if you'd like.
It is mentioned in the management. So this is, I mean, I don't want to discuss this, so this is the annual report, just showing the work that BDO have done. Thank you. Yeah, just to repeat that, yeah. It is in the next report, it's mentioned the parking management, and that this report is the annual report showing the work that BDO have done over the year. The next report is the current report on the current issues. So welcome to delve further into that on that report. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. So we'll move on to the next report. Thank you.
And thank you, Chair. You probably know my reports better than I should. I do in terms of if it's included in the next one. So the next report is our progress report. So this comes to each meeting and it summarises the progress of our work naturally. This report's covering 23-24, which I previously said is substantially complete. We've not muddied the waters by starting to report on 24-25. So the next committee meeting, that will solely be focused on the new plan that we've currently kicked off. In addition to the council work, we obviously audit schools, and you'll see there that we've completed all of our schools works programme. We're just waiting for responses on 4 draft reports, which we hopefully expect soon before the summer period ends, summer term ends. We touched on it in the annual report, but our progress report also covers the progress being made by management in closing down our recommendations and the implementation rate, which, as I said before, is up to 90%, which is an improvement from around 84-85% when we last reported in February. So there has been some management action, follow-up and escalation to help us get to that point. But I won't say anything more and happy to take any questions. And there are summaries of all the reports that have been finalised since the last meeting.
Thank you very much. Members' questions. Andy.
I've got a few, so maybe I could do one or two and then hand back to the chair and then see how colleagues go. Page 40 of our report, page 7 of your report, there's draft reports issued, capital expenditure management, housing revenue account, important issue, draft report 13th of February 2024. Like we're months and months. Where's that at and why haven't we got it?
So as the draft report, what was issued then, we've actually been going through some further evidence and discussions with management to ensure it's an accurate reflection of the work, because sometimes when we're doing the work and information is being provided, the reason why we then take it up through management trial and the management and execs to sign it off is to ensure that it's a full reflection of what's occurring, etc. And our scope has covered everything we need to. So in those examples, we wanted to ensure that we took into account the wider kind of, as you mentioned, Andy, the issues that are occurring. So it's just been a case of reviewing extra information to ensure, but it's pretty close to finalisation, as I understand it.
So should we have a summary for July, our July meeting?
I fully expect that, yes, because we've actually got set ourselves the deadline of closing all of the reports down by the end of June to inform that meeting.
And then over on the next couple of pages, there's Children and Adult Services Adopt London Partnership, and then Two Towers TMO. In the QA reporting box, there's just nothing there. It's just a blank. I'm just wondering where we're up to with those.
It's blank because they were in field work at the time of writing, so the previous column, it doesn't get completed until we move into that stage. Yep. But I can confirm that both of those are moving pretty much to completion of the field work and draft reporting stage. And
then one last one before I hand back to the chair. Page 48 of our report, page 15 of your report. I've been dazzled by the 3-letter acronyms in there. And it refers to an OMG, which I thought stood for oh my goodness or something similar. Is that the OMB, or is there some other body or acronym called OMG?
I believe they're exactly the same, and instead of being called the OMB, it's been referred to as the Operational Management Group, but that is an error, it should be board.
Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions in case I need to hand back to Andy? And did you have some more questions?
Just a couple. Page 49. So we're looking at IT shared service governance. And when you look at areas of concern under page 49, there is insufficient clarity on the roles and responsibilities, blah, 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 cybersecurity. Now, given how important cybersecurity is, that sort of that concerns me a lot. Are you able to shed any light on this? If not, I would like to ask that the committee ask for some follow-up information on this, because the number of times we've discussed this over the years, I really wasn't expecting this to come back, and it's the type of thing which can floor a council if we don't get it right.
Yeah, I think the finding less relates to our cybersecurity resilience and more in the arrangement that our in-house IT team have with the shared service with Brent and Lewisham and Southwark, is the individual roles and responsibilities within that. That said, they all report into what we call a CIRO board, Statutory Information Risk Officer board. So it's coordinated at a high level. I think the findings are related to specifically within the contract who's responsible for what, but those have since been addressed from the auditor's finding.
Chair, maybe we could just ask for an update by email to members of the committee and reserves then, so that we are cited on that in advance of the next meeting.
Are you clear what Andy's asking for there? Yeah.
I was going to say, the details in the report, as Clive just mentioned there as well, so where we've done a summary, we've made it look worse, and if there were any significant issues with cyber, it wouldn't be coming out of a moderator opinion, but I'm happy to help Clive respond to that.
Okay, thank you. So, like back what we just discussed there, and we'd like a summary for the July meeting of the capital expenditure housing revenue account draft report, with further information.
Yeah, that would be included as well.
Okay, thank you. Can we note both report 7 and report 8? Thank you. We're now on to item 9, annual report of the corporate anti-fraud team, finance and the special investigations team. Welcome. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, please.
Thank you. Tim Jones, Director of Corporate Finance.
Geraldine Chadwick in Corporate Finance too.
Thank you, Geraldine. Okay, who's going to start?
I'll kick off. Brief report here. Should be familiar in content in terms of why it's being presented in this way. Historically, BDO, who you've just heard from, would have presented a joint report, annual report on internal audits and anti-fraud. You'll note from the recommendations here, or the background information, that we have recently made a permanent appointment to managerial role in the team and have bolstered the team over the last few years, and as a result we've phased out the support from BDO on the anti-fraud side of things. So this is the first annual report that you'll have received in this way, although it's effectively the same information as you'd have received in a combined report in previous years. As in previous reports, the content is largely talking about the work that's been undertaken over the year. Unsurprisingly, we're unable to go into significant detail about any of that work. Obviously, we're quite happy to have conversations in a less public environment about the nature of some of the work, and we do so with some of you who bring us some of that work. But happy to take any questions you've got and may be able to bring further answers back in another forum if helpful.
Did you have anything to add, Geraldine?
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Page 89, 20, talk about matching data sets, which is good. just over 6,000 matches identified, 3,000 have been processed. How long will it take to process the other roughly 3,000?
I'm not sure. I'd have to come back to you and ask you and come back with an answer with that. But I think each one, sometimes they're just easy, as you would know. Sometimes they're just not an issue at all. Sometimes they're on hold. We have to go and look into them a bit more. So the matches, I think the NFI initiative comes from Cabinet in a 2-year batch. So we have like 2 years to process it before we get another batch. So my feeling would be by the end of this year, but I would like to come back to you.
I was just going to suggest that we just ask for an email update to members and reserves in advance of the next meeting, and that would be helpful to have that information.
Would you be in a position to do that?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Marky.
Thank you. Can I ask about the work that's on blue badge fraud? I was interested. Obviously the numbers here. I'm not sure from the information provided how many of the. This says there were 14 cases closed. But I'm not sure from the information provided how many of those what action was actually taken in relation to all of those. But I'm also interested in perhaps what's the trigger for that investigation in the first place. What is the the threshold of reporting? Who is reporting that sort of fraud, and the degree to which we can. Obviously, a lot of vehicles that potentially could be using fraudulent passes in this borough are not necessarily coming from this borough, so the degree to which we're able to take action further afield as well.
I'll start. It looks like Clive wants to come as well. We get some of it comes through tip-offs, some of it comes through the Blue Badge Fraud Investigation Service, which is a community interest company that operates through loads of local authorities across the country, specifically to combat that. So most of the work is done through them. In terms of answering in more detail, I can come back to you on that. I couldn't give you specifics about what we do with outer borough and things like that at this point.
Can I I'm particularly, this is actually an issue that I raised recently with the parking team, and that's why I was quite interested to see it on the agenda. I was specifically my interest was triggered, shall I say, due to a lot of parking that I've seen in my ward around the events that have actually been taking place in Brockwell Park, which of course is Lambeth, and looking at the parking enforcement work that was actually done on the Southwark side of the boundary, but also seeing a huge number of blue badges on display. Thank you. I'd be very interested in any follow-up information.
Yeah, of course, we'll be happy to do that. Yeah, get back to you directly.
Michael.
Again, thanks for the update. Just looking on page 86 of our bundle, page 2 of your report, on the various kind of anti-fraud work done. I know each section would probably kind of occupy different level of kind of officer resources itself. Do we have a priority order in terms of based on risk, or is there any guidance in relation to that, or is it based on kind of what saves the council more money in that respect?
Thanks, yeah. So, yes, we have a triaging process, so all tip-offs that come into the corporate anti-fraud team are triaged. And the more significant looking cases will normally involve a conversation with myself or Clive or both of us. So we have an input into that process. There isn't a kind of a risk matrix or scoring mechanism that we're using to determine how we allocate resources. It will vary. There are cases that will require very little time. There are cases that require us to hire in external support and require several people's entire job for a whole year. So there isn't a simple answer to that, but we do take a sensible, pragmatic approach to the risk-reward factor in each case.
Do you think there should be one, or you don't think it's necessary? Because I'm just kind of looking at potentially kind of so going to page 90, page 6 of your report. Just looking at kind of the housing tenancy investigation there, and the fact that year start 402 opened, year end 548 opened, and thinking about kind of how kind of homes are almost like a kind of a gold dust in sort of council homes, and the fact that maybe if more resources are kind of thrown into it, maybe we will have more homes that could go to kind of needing people within Southwark. I don't know whether there needs to be one, or whether you think actually just on an ad hoc individual basis still works best.
I don't mean to come in on that. So I think the nature of fraud investigations, each case is very different. So to try and apply a hard and fast rule, I think is always going to be challenging. That said, we've got an experienced team of officers who can in turn then pull on through support through Aaron and his team at BDO, additional support. And we also share some resource with Lambeth as well. So in order to manage the peaks and troughs that we have over the course of the year. But there is available additional resource if we find there are spikes in what's coming through the system. That said, they are experienced investigators, and it's a bit like the police really. You get a bit of a feel in terms of where you think there's something in that and there's something not. But absolutely, health and safety, keeping people safe, recovery of housing assets are our top priorities. In amongst all that, obviously there's all this other work that the team get involved with. So the data matching that Geraldine mentioned earlier on today, the team are heavily involved in that, but it's a lot of work, and a lot of those are false positives, so don't lead anywhere. So it's about how do you use your experience to direct the resource to where it's going to be most beneficial.
Okay.
If I
Did you want to add to that?
Just to add, I suppose there's a general question there, but there's also the specific around the priority around housing, is what I'm hearing. And we have a corporate anti-fraud team which oversees the whole corporate anti-fraud effort, but they support a specific housing special investigation team that do look specifically at just the housing. So that's the only significant other fraud team that we have. So there is a special focus within this council on housing fraud specifically, if you see what I mean.
Okay. That's very helpful. Just again, is there any kind of way you can provide, maybe not necessarily for the next meeting, but between the meeting, just a little bit of more correlation between the years? So rather than just kind of the 2023 to 2024, it's just trying to understand whether if actually more resources are thrown into this area, whether we could get more outcome or not.
Yes, I think we could probably attempt to provide that.
Okay.
Let us look at the numbers and see if it shows what I think you're hoping it will show, and then if we can produce it in that way, we'll bring it to a subsequent meeting.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the context of that, whether these numbers are very high at the moment, relatively. I'd be also interested to know what the breakdown is between internal and external possible fraud. So, is there any investigations of internal fraud that go on as opposed to external fraud?
Yes, there are, absolutely, yeah.
And, would you be able to supply the breakdown at all? Maybe percentages to the committee?
Yes.
By email?
Yes, we could, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Nick?
Thanks, Barry. Clive, my question relates to right to buy and a trigger which happens when a certain percentage of the cost of the property comes in cash. I can understand some of the logic in that because there may be some fear that the cash has been acquired through criminal activity, but it may also be have been acquired through digital exclusion. And I wondered to what extent any measures were put in place to allow for that. Do you have to prove that the cash didn't come from any criminal, or is there an assumption that how high a bar do you have to clear? And if someone is digitally excluded and has their cash under the mattress, metaphorically or literally, they may not be able to prove that the money didn't come from dealing skunk. But on the other hand, it probably didn't. And I'm mindful that we may end up by inadvertently excluding a group or people who are vulnerable.
I can probably answer that, sorry.
You going or shall I? So the nature of cash, we're still obliged to comply with the money laundering regulations, which require us to place assurance on sources of wealth, in effect. Where there's cash that's being used as payment, that puts a further obligation on us to discover the source of that cash. Of course, we want to be as inclusive as possible, but just the nature of cash means we have to be compliant as an organisation. As a consequence of that, the further checks we can apply, but that's done in a supportive way in terms of, I guess, supporting the resident to help provide the evidence that they need to provide. And, assuming they come from legitimate means, which in most cases it always does, that should be very easy for them to apply.
Thank you. And Andy and then Michael. Oh, you're still asking?
It's a different question because it's on this point.
Okay.
Mine's an aside that once a leaseholder came to my surgery and wanted to give me the cash for their major works and that I would pass on to the council. Just to be really clear, I refused that and passed that back to officers to deal with.
Thank you.
Clive, just to assist us where, but my understanding is it's not just in terms of kind of the legitimacy of the cash in terms of the original source itself, but I understand also in terms of right to buy, it's also important where there's large cash transaction to try to prevent somebody essentially giving you money in order to buy so that you can sell it back, so that the money itself may be clean, okay, but actually right to buy doesn't allow there to be almost like a pseudo buyer essentially choose someone else, so that those cash flagging are very good at preventing kind of almost like professional kind of property companies offering cash to our residents to kind of get a property eventually.
Sorry. And Tim will provide a breakdown between internal and external fraud.
Yes, and look at just some additional
and a global
presentation.
wider context for.
Yes, yeah,
so
year on year sort of comparisons.
That's what you wanted, Michael, wasn't it? Yeah. And Margie was promised information about
I would like
parking.
some more information on blue badge fraud.
Specifically?
Actually, I'd like as much information as possible. So, what generates investigations, how they're carried out, what the outcome has been, and whether there is any interface with potentially other issuing authorities, which are not necessarily taking place in Southwark itself. Thank you. And anything else you can think of that would be relevant? I'm just quite interested. Thank you.
I mean, let's try and, I know your enthusiasm is impeccable, but if we can just keep it specifically to what officers need to provide, to answer your audit and governance concerns. Is that right? Okay. So just for me, just to understand how the issue about other authorities interfaces, because presumably we're interested in fraud as it happens in Southwark. Is that right? So is that, yeah?
Yes, but for example, some people displaying a blue badge when they park in Southwark
that may be fraudulent
will not necessarily have acquired that pass as a Southwark resident. So I'm interested, what, if anything, we do about that? Do we even investigate it at all? And so on.
Is that a question that we better put to the parking team?
I already have put it to the parking team, actually.
And their response was?
I haven't got a response to that.
Not yet. Would you be able to?
No, that's a question we'd be happy to take as the anti-fraud
for your part of your work. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. All right, great. Thank you. Can we note the report? And thank you both. Thank you. We now move on to External Audit Plan and Strategy for Southwark Council 2023-24. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, welcome.
Of course. Good evening, everyone. My name is Claire Meagle, and I am your new engagement partner. I'm a partner at KPMG. I've worked in our public sector team there for over 20 years, and I'm responsible for all of the external audit work that we deliver for you from now on in. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And good evening, my name is Philip Kent, I'm a Senior Manager at KPMG and I am your External Audit Senior Manager. So I'll be responsible for the day-to-day coordination of our audit for the Council's financial statements. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all today as well.
Welcome. Would you like to talk through
Yes,
your report?
lovely, thank you. So we have a draft of our audit plan here for the committee. This evening, there's a lot of detail in here, but I'll pull out some of the key points that we wanted to highlight, and then, of course, really happy to take any questions that you have. So if I first take you to page 98 of your pack, which is 3 of ours, and that's just to highlight the materiality that we work to on this audit. So if we find errors over and above 13.9 million, we would require those to be corrected. We would consider those to be material. Anything between our reporting threshold, which is 695,000, and that materiality amount, we wouldn't necessarily make you adjust for that if we found errors of that order, but we would absolutely report them through to this committee so that you would be cited on those and we could have a discussion and you'd understand what those were. We do, of course, take into account anything that could be material by nature as well. So we'll look at things like remuneration, disclosures for senior members of staff. We'll look at related party transactions to make sure that they're all appropriately arm's length. And if we were to find anything that we thought was wrong in those, we would ask you to correct those as well. We have already started doing quite a bit of our planning and risk assessment work for the council, so we'd like to extend our thanks to officers so far. We know that there's been a huge amount of audit activity with the outgoing audits that Grant Thornton have been doing and servicing our requests, and we've had really good cooperation so far, so I wanted to make that point. So it's been a really good start to the audit relationship. If I take you to page 100 of your pack, page 5 of ours, this is where we think about what we consider to be the significant audit risks. So we're not saying they're significant risks to the council in general. This is from the point of view of the audit that we're undertaking. and where we think, by virtue of the balance in your financial statements, where we think there could be, in theory, a material misstatement if we found something wrong. So that's why the valuation of your land and buildings is one. This is probably quite familiar to you in terms of what Grant Thornton have reported previously, but they're huge balances, the assets that you have as a council on your balance sheet. There are a number of assumptions that go into deriving that value at each year end, lots of different data inputs, so it's really important that we're comfortable with all of that, and we involve our real estate team to support us in that work, and we've already had a planning meeting with them and officers from the council as well, which has been really helpful. The valuation of your pension liability, similarly, really large numbers, lots of assumptions that go into determining that value. So we make sure that we're really comfortable with how that's been approached. We also have to think on every single audit that management override of controls could be an issue. So it's our responsibility as auditors to have that sceptical mindset and think that management is in theory in a position to override the control environment. We have to bear that in mind, so we make sure we plan procedures to address that. And that's where we will look at areas of judgment that management might make, so provisions that might go into the accounts, for example. We also look at journal entries, so anything that gets booked into the financial statements, typically non-cash transactions, thinking about where those could be high risk, and we do lots of work over that as well. What we've also highlighted here this year is what we describe as a fraud risk from HRA expenditure recognition, and I'll just explain that to you because it's quite an audity way of describing that. But we know, of course, that there are quite specific totals and budgets that you have to be held to. And we know that the HRA is under a lot of pressure financially. We know that that's a really big challenge for the council. And you have to report within certain limits. So we have to have the mindset of thinking, if there was an incentive to understate that expenditure and still meet the limits that are set, does that exist as a kind of incentive potentially? We're not saying that we've found any evidence in our planning and risk assessment work to date that that is the case, but it's our responsibility as your auditors to think that that might be an area where there could be pressure. So that's why we've expressed it in those terms as part of our audit plan. We see this not in every single authority that we're working with, but it's not an uncommon area, particularly at the moment in the economic environment in which local authorities are operating. We've then highlighted some other areas of audit risk that we're going to be considering. We don't think there's such a significant risk of material misstatement in those, but they're large balances, there's some complexity to them. The PFI valuation, that's the first time we're going to be looking at your PFI contracts and the liabilities and making sure we're really comfortable. There are lots of models that go into producing those numbers. And the valuation of investment property, there are typically fewer assumptions, there are more readily available market information to assess against. So we think it's a risk because they're quite big numbers, but we don't think it's such a high risk. But we will do lots of work over it. And there's a new leasing standard coming in, IFRS 16. So we'll just make sure that you're ready for that and thinking about that in our audit. We've provided lots and lots of detail in the document about the specific procedures that we'll perform. I obviously don't propose to go through those, but I will just highlight on page 108 of your pack, 13 of ours, the areas where we've rebutted a significant fraud risk in relation to your income streams. And this again is thinking about that, where might you be incentivized to report the financial position in a certain way. Those income streams are relatively straightforward to audit, and the way in which you receive that funding, it's not difficult for us to audit that. So we think the risk of a material misstatement is relatively low in audit terms. And we've also highlighted where we've rebutted that expenditure fraud risk on the following page, which is 109 of your pack. We'll also consider the disclosures in your financial statements, and we'll do a lot of work over lots of the balances that aren't reported in here, but we wanted to make sure we were giving you some insights into where we think there are the areas of greatest risk. Hopefully that feels relatively similar to how your previous auditors have approached the risks at the council. And in a moment, I'll be happy to take some questions. I think Philip's just going to touch on how we approach value for money for you.
Thank you, Fleur. So we, just like our predecessors, are required to give a view on the arrangements the council has in place to achieve value for money. This is not about assessing the merits or the potentials of any particular activity that you may have undertaken during the year, but to assess whether you have the right arrangements to make good decisions and achieve good use of taxpayer funds. The work we do is prescribed by the National Audit Office in their local audit code of practice. And what this requires us to do is to understand the key procedures and arrangements you have in place to ensure the council is financially sustainable. It has good governance arrangements to make informed decisions and manage its risks, and to improve economy, efficiency and effectiveness by using information about costs and performance and peer comparisons to identify opportunities for improvement and hopefully make those improvements if it is so necessary. The way we approach our work in relation to value for money is to perform a risk assessment, which informs the commentary, which will eventually be published as part of our annual auditor's report. And we also might identify from this what we call a significant value for money risk. Our predecessor will have a similar concept but under a different name. And just as Fleur said with the audit risks as not being areas where we think there's a risk to the council, but these are the areas where we think there has been some activity, maybe as a result of an external inspection or some adverse media, which means we need to do some additional work to be satisfied that the council does have those good arrangements in place to achieve value for money. So as we complete our risk assessment work and as we'll report to this committee in a future meeting, we will identify what those significant value for money risks are, if any, what additional work we then plan to do in order to respond to those risks, and as a consequence we will either conclude the council does have proper arrangements in place, or alternatively we may conclude there might be some areas where there are opportunities for improvement which would form part of our public reporting. On page 112 of your pack, which is 17 of ours, we've highlighted a few areas where, as part of our initial risk assessment work, we've identified a few areas where we plan to make further inquiries, but our work does remain underway. We look at what has happened at the council for the entire year and make use of the work of people like internal audit. So those areas may well change by the time we complete our risk assessment, but hopefully it gives you an idea of the type of stuff that we look at as part of our work. So to finalise, when we've completed this, we'll let you know what our view on the value for money arrangements are, what areas we need to do further work on, and then give you an idea of what we plan to write in our public commentary, which you will publish alongside your financial statements when we complete our opinion. And I'll pass back to Fleur to discuss the next steps.
Lovely, thank you. So we just have a few other points to make. In this report, there are a number of appendices and mandatory communications that we have to share with you as a committee about our responsibilities in relation to fraud and other information, and also our independence. And we've provided a bit more detail on that alongside our fees on pages 118 and 119. There are some pieces of non-audit work that we will perform. They are all permissible services. They're on page 120. They're things like your housing benefit subsidy return, they're grant claim type audits. But for transparency, we capture that here so you can see what's the full extent of the work that we're performing as your external auditors across the council. You've got the detail of the team there, and there are some other appendices which are really just for information. But really, looking forward to working with you all and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from members? Andy, Nick, Michael.
3 quick questions. Our page 100, your page 5, you've got your little chart looking at likelihood and potential impact. Is this is based on Southwark, is it, rather than fine?
Yes, that's absolutely, it's based on Southwark.
Then our page 109, your page 14, capital programme. talks about a circa £1 underspend in the capital programme, which I'll be very happy about. What should that figure be?
Should that be million?
I think it should be
We'll
million,
check
but we
that.
can double check that.
Well spotted, thank you.
And then I had one more. Oh, so page 117 is just looking at your audit cycle and timetable. Finalisation of accounts, October 24. Approval of accounts by audit committee, October 24. What's your level of confidence in that?
We're working to complete the audit this side of December. We are hopeful to do it by then. We'll keep you appraised on how that's going as we go through the planning and risk assessment. We're really committed to, now you have your 23 audit concluded, getting back to a normal timetable as soon as possible. We've certainly got resources set up to do that. With a first-year audit, there are always a degree of unknowns in terms of the way in which we approach the audit of the information and whether we find issues. So I would say I'm very confident that we should be able to sign this side of Christmas, whether it's actually in October or November. I don't know yet, but we can update you as we go through the year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, then Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Are there any significant methodological differences in your approach compared to Grant Thornton's that you are aware of?
No, there aren't. There aren't, no.
Thank you. Michael?
Again, thank you for this. One of the things that I've been kind of approached on a couple of times is the kind of risk or non-risk of council borrowing more, essentially, and potential that we've got asset base. It's not. I mean, it looks like it's one of the areas you'll be looking at in terms of kind of the relationship between what our current value of assets is and what we're taking itself. It would be good to kind of hear your thoughts as to whether that would take into account the change in kind of political situation as well, in terms of potentially whether the economy is going to be better or not in terms of interest rate, or whether you just kind of give us a snapshot of what it was at that particular point in time. So,
thank you. So in terms of the valuation of your assets, they will be valued as at the 31st of March 2024. So they will take into account, and you have commissioned external valuers this year to do that work for you, and they're really quite well progressed. We will look at that. If we, I mean, it is our work would absolutely take into account that point in time. We may well report, if we knew that there had been some really significant seismic changes in the economic environment by the time we sign, we may just provide some commentary on that, reminding you and ourselves and in our reporting that was as at the 31st of March. But anything that happened after that, it would really fall into the following year's audit, but we would take it into account if there was anything really, really significant.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. So would any member of the committee like to speak any further on this matter? No, thank you.
Lovely. And one thing I should just have mentioned as well, because we do have Kunal with us too. Kunal is the manager responsible for the pension fund audit. We haven't produced the plan yet. We're slightly further behind in our planning and risk assessment work on the pension fund, but we'll bring that to the next committee, and you'll hear from us more on that then.
Yes, okay. We very much look forward to that.
Thank you.
Are you going to be sticking around for item 13 on this agenda? It shouldn't be too long away.
Yes, that's fine. Yes, of course.
KPMG are mentioned in that.
Yes.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we note the report? Thank you. Okay, we now move on to the draft annual governance report. And we have Geraldine and Tim back. welcome back. Geraldine?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just introducing the report, this is a statutory requirement. We bring it every year to the Audit Committee. This is the first draft. We then take on board any comments and we bring it back as part of the set of accounts for 23-24 in July or September. The differences this year, I think, are just presentational. Probably you've got it in colour. You've probably got the new kind of colours for Southwark. The report's been through CMT, and they've had their comments on it, so they've made their amendments. I'll go through it very quickly, but I don't want to take too much of your time, so I guess everyone's read it. So the first few pages are quite standard. You've probably seen them before. We standard from each year. Then we get to, if anyone wants to stop me at any point, please do. And then we look at the governance issues and the assurance statement. That's my page 146. So what I've done this time is put it into a table, make it easier, and then kind of referencing the paragraphs. So we've looked at everything, the issues we raised in the 2022-23 annual governance statements, and kind of commented on those paragraph by paragraph. And then we've gone to emerging issues actually during the year in 23-24, or any main issues we've come across, and that's really around the peer review. That's probably the most fundamental thing that happened in 23-24, and again, ongoing cybersecurity. And then we've moved forward, and it's quite contained in SIP for what we include and what we don't include in the annual governance statement, which is we have to look forward as well as looking at the year we're in, and also making sure we've looked at the issues that have arisen the previous year. And so we're looking forward into the medium term, and that's on page 157, and what our main concerns, and obviously the housing revenue account has come up a few times. That has also been reported to Cabinet on a number of occasions. Obviously we're planning for, I was going to say 2 elections, but actually it's now 1. When this is written, it was written a bit earlier. So those kind of changes I'll make between the draft and the final when I'm not quite sure what the outcome will be from the general election. I'm allowed to say that, I think I am. And then the medium-term financial plan for the following year, of course, depends on our government, but probably, we're on a tight austerity course, do you know what I mean, regardless, so we're always on tight resources. We are changing our ERP system, which is basically our IT system for HR and finance, so that's a kind of big project going on. And then also our kind of ongoing improvements in governance that come out of the peer review. So I will take any questions anyone has. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. I'd like to thank you very much for this report. It, really tells us so much about all the work that Southwark Council are doing, and you've put that all together in a very accessible way. There's still more work to be done on it to finalise the report, and then it will come back to committee in October. Is that correct?
I think we should go with the accounts. So whenever we bring the accounts back, we'll bring this back as a final version, and in my covering report, what I'll do is I'll mention any changes we've done. There'll be a few changes around probably the result of the general election, or only having 1 election. There'll be a few minor changes, but anything major or anything different, I will alert in a covering report, so you have to read it all again. But thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much. Can we note the report? Thank you. We now move on to the annual report on the work and performance of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee 2023-24. Is that correct? Have I jumped something? Forgive me. Oh, SIPFA. Forgive me. Yeah, SIPFA. Yeah, we go back to SIPFA. Thank you. So this is item 12, compliance with the SIPFA Financial Management Code. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
As another report we bring back every year this time round, it's mandatory now. So what we do is we look at all our controls, financial controls, and we map them against what is against the 6 core principles. We do it quite comprehensively, so I'm sorry about the number of pages that everyone's had to print. Hopefully everyone's read it. We bring back every time. I mean, it was always brought about, for this, which I mean, it's relatively new, around their concerns of financial sustainability and the Section 114 notices. Southwark have come out quite well in the last few years because in terms of our general fund, our reserves are good. They haven't got a whole section on the HRA, but we've put that into the appendix so that we're aware of those kind of issues. Again, we reported to Cabinet. The main issues across the country around demand pressures and social care and the lower level of reserves and the likelihood some authorities might go in Section 114. We map ourselves against each of these kind of codes, and we also look at SIFRA's Financial Resilience Index, which is an online tool looking at areas that are, we could be higher risk or lower risk. There's nothing in there that we didn't already know. We have a high level of debt, so we're aware of that as being slightly higher than the average would be. Otherwise, we are lower risk for all other areas. So across all the authorities, I suppose paragraph 11, the overall findings for all of 4 local authorities show falling reserves and increase in social care expenditure. We've got, we don't have falling reserves, we've got quite stable level reserves, and in terms of social care expenditure, we have a tight control and budget monitoring controls in place. So I think we're in a quite stable background on our general fund. Happy to take any other questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions to this report? Andy?
So, Chair, we look at page 177. In terms of usability, I would prefer in the future. I don't mind if it's longer, but I found this not always a joy to read. I look at FM standard reference key questions, we bullet point questions. Now I'm trying to follow across, find out are questions being answered. It has been quite, I would say it's been quite painful to read. So I don't mind if you lay it out and it's longer, but I didn't find it a joy to go through. And if you were to lay it out more clearly in future, reference across, then I would find it more of a joy to read.
Yes, it is a joy, isn't it? It's a joy to write as well. What they do, what they do in the FM reference, they have SIFRA. It's not very user friendly, I have to say. They have the reference and the key questions, and then they have a set of guidance notes that attach the questions. So it's quite difficult. So it's supposed to help you drill down, but they don't always correspond to the questions. So I hear what you say. So I can address the key questions or the guidance notes. But yes, I'll try to do it, make it shorter and more readable. I'll note that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for doing this. It was a long read, it would have been even longer to write if we could just ask for a clearer, easier. As I said, I don't mind the length of work, just I find it quite difficult to read. For next time.
Yes, of course.
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Okay, is there any more questions? No, thank you. With that request, can we note the report? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Every year, the committee sends out an annual report on its work and performance to all members of the council. One of the parts of that we have circulated over the years is a self-assessment questionnaire, which we've been very grateful for the responses we've got, and have used the responses that we've got to look at some feedback of ways that we officers can help the committee feel more confident in its own skills and capacities. Some of the suggestions are laid out in this report. Do you have any, is there anything on top of that? Is there anything within these suggestions that you'd like to take up? Is there anything we can do to help?
Anybody starts with 10? Nick.
Thank you. And thank you for this. I thought the suggestion of committee members meeting with auditors would be a very useful thing, particularly as part of a training session, just to increase our skill set.
Yeah. And along those lines, would it be possible to get some bespoke in-house training at which the external auditors could possibly contribute? Do we think that's perfectly possible? Yeah. Okay. Very much welcome that.
Chair, I don't know whether Clive may be in a better position to answer, but sometimes I feel that perhaps the best way to kind of know what you're looking for is sometimes to have somebody who is not sort of the one that's preparing the things that you're reading in itself. Because so I don't know whether you think actually I agree that we need to have kind of the external auditor's input, but I don't know whether it's best done by the external auditors we use, or whether it's best to have somebody who can just say, if you're looking at this report, actually this is kind of what you should be looking at. This is the language. Language used like this should signify this. You should ask more questions about this.
I think just before you come in there, Clive, if you don't mind, thank you. I think that's not saying that KPMG provide the
okay, so this
training.
is not okay.
I think they can input into our training session. Is that?
Yes, no,
that was what
I know that, but
yeah.
I was asking whether
Okay.
they're the right person or not. But
Well,
certainly.
no, but I mean,
yeah.
I think the thing is, from the feedback, is that it is better for members to have more of a relationship with the external auditors,
Go on.
and I think that. But you know, I hope I'm not cutting across what you've asked there too much. Clive, did you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a bit tricky, isn't it? Particularly when the first audit committee of the new cycle, I guess, is only a fortnight after the AGM, so to speak. So you have a mix of new members and very experienced members. The nature of the audit committee is it does cut across the work of the entire council and beyond. And as a consequence of that, you know, sometimes it is challenging to get under the detail. But I guess what I would like to get into is working alongside our external and internal audit colleagues is not a training session or a training cycle in the patronising sense of here's officers telling members how to do the job, but a sort of more relaxed two-way arrangement whereby we do have specific points in the cycle where we know something like the accounts is coming that Amajit will present later in the year, and you know it's a big 250-page document that's difficult to get your teeth into. So bringing sort of generic training around how the usual cycle of work works, but also more specific sessions where we can guide you through in a very sort of informal setting, so that when we get into the public session, you've got the confidence of how the system works behindhand, and then you're more confident in asking those questions that you may want to ask that's entirely appropriate to do so. But I'm sure Fleur from the external audit side and Aaron is gone now from the internal audit side, and between the work of Tim and myself, we'll put that into a structure for the year.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. Sometimes what we do is share just insights from the sector that we're seeing, you know, across our portfolio, just so you can compare some of the risks that with the other authorities are dealing with. That's not uncommon, but we'd be happy to feed into that. And yes, I think it is good practice to be able to meet with members private periods through the year. And that Barry and I have worked on a couple of times as part of our sort of introduction to the council
Yes.
committee. But yeah, happy to support your work.
And I think that it's up to members how much or how little further training there is. But there is quite a bit of training available, and maybe an email could go out to members of the committee and reserves, showing all the different types of training that is possible that people may want to follow up on. It's an offer for people, and I've found it very useful, the training that I've had, to residential sessions with LGA on audit and on finance, which I found very, very helpful, and takes me away from the report itself, and I can look at things in a wider sense. So I would recommend that, but it's up to members themselves. So thank you. Can we note the report? Oh, could I just say one other thing I meant to say, sorry, and that is, if people can have in mind going forward that we do this every year, and then as we go forward at the end of the year, more of us may contribute to self-assessment. Thank you. Thanks. Final item then is membership of the Audit, Governance and Standards Subcommittees for 2024-25, which was deferred from Annual Council.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
Virginia.
You have two subcommittees for the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee. The Civic Awards Subcommittee, which has by tradition been at least attempted to be gender neutral if possible, or have a balanced representation across the committee. And the Standards Committee, which deals with any member complaints or similar that goes that far. The Civic Awards Subcommittee has one meeting a year to decide the Civic Award nominations. The Standards Subcommittee is an ad hoc committee. It has been convened, I think, once in the past 3 or 4 years. So it's not a high traffic committee, but it is very important when it happens.
Okay. And the four members, just to be clear, the four members for the Civic Awards Subcommittee are actual members of the council. That's not anything else.
Yes, there are. This is the voting membership of the subcommittee, so that can comprise any member who is a member or a reserve of this committee. The non-voting co-opted members will be decided on later in the year.
Okay, so let's start with the appoint 3 members to the Standards Subcommittee. Do we have any volunteers at this stage? Okay, it's Nick from the Lib Dem Group. Thank you, Nick. Anyone else?
How fast can anyone else step backwards?
You have been on there before, Michael, and have actually chaired it. Was you interested in...
Yeah, I think it's just us two, so I think we may have to... Yes, that's correct.
It is entirely possible for you to nominate a member who is not here present at the moment.
But I'd rather not do that.
That's perfectly reasonable.
Fact, if someone's not around, it's not something I like doing. I'd rather defer the item if people feel that. But I just,
We nominate 2 people who put themselves forward.
Yeah.
We nominate the group then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then come back
Okay.
at the next meeting to fill.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. And then if there was a need to convene an urgent standards committee, there is a way.
I think it is very unlikely that you will need to convene a standard subcommittee in the next 6 weeks.
Okay.
we can hope.
Okay, so you've put yourself forward and Margaret's put themselves forward. Margaret, did you?
I
reserve
didn't
members
actually,
can.
but on the basis that it doesn't really
Yeah.
meet very often. My understanding is, so you say it's met once in the last 4 years.
Yes.
Margaret, my advice would not to be.
Okay, so
thus far, Councillor Johnson and Councillor Sheetu have put their names forward. Right.
And then we are looking at gender balance, so it is, and it is. I did inquire about this previous year, and it was said that we can. But we are looking at gender balance, so it is, and it is. I did inquire about this previous year, and it was said that we can. reserved members, but at the moment we're looking at maybe asking someone who's not here tonight whether or not they can fill that third place. Do we want to appoint the chair of the subcommittee? I would be.
Chair, looking at people who are here and who are not here, and looking at our wonderful Linden colleagues, I am guided by you. If you would like to be on that subcommittee, as chair, I'm happy for you to do that. If you would not like to be on that committee, then I'm happy to do it. But I'm very happy for you to take the place if you'd like to.
Are you taking civic awards now? Are you on to civic awards?
I think, oh, sorry, you're
Yeah. Yeah. That's okay.
Andy's just volunteered for standards.
No, he's stepping back. He said he's very much the back.
I
Yeah.
will propose Michael then.
Yeah.
Bring everything he is of
Do you want to?
How many people left on?
There are three places for the standard subcommittee, of which 2 are currently committed for Councillor Johnson and yourself. We are discussing whether or not one of you 2 would like to sit as the chair of that committee, to be nominated and seconded as that, or if the currently free third place may well sit as the chair of that committee.
I'd like to nominate Michael.
If he wants to take it, I mean, if he does want to take it, it's up to him.
I'm just, Andy's not taking it.
What we need to refill with gravity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think somebody who has been a mayor of Southwark would be ideally placed to take on.
You haven't, Nick. You're the only one of the.
Andy's foreseen something. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Civic awards. I'd be happy to continue to be on civic awards and to chair that if that's agreed. And we need 4 other members and
3 other members.
3 other members, and again we are looking at gender balance. Did you want to be on there, Nick, or did we want to hold it for Councillor Neil?
Would feel that was a prize he'd been robbed of.
Yes, I think he was on last year. I think he did enjoy it as well. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So we'll hold that one back for now, if that.
If you're happy to nominate Councillor Neil in absentia, it's...
It's not something I like to do, but if Nick wants to do that, that's
the option.
We'll ask
at our
him.
next
Yeah.
meeting.
That's true. He can say no, can't he?
Can step back.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
The committee membership can be changed afterwards, yes.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Let's do that.
Okay. Yeah.
2 further places.
Yeah, and we want to. Do they need to be female to get gender balance or not?
Yes.
Yeah, they do that. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Hey, Mark,
sorry.
you're quite interested in civic awards, aren't you?
Did you
I
say
would,
where they can
I would be happy to sit
Yeah.
on the Civic Awards
You are.
Committee.
Yeah. So can I nominate Margie Nowens? And then we'll hold one back.
May I nominate you as the chair of the sub?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
I note that Councillor Dora Dixon-File is a member of the Audit Governance and Standards Committee and has an interest, I believe.
She's already expressed interest.
She hasn't said so, but I know that she's been a member in the past.
Yes. Yes, but I'd say we will ask Councillor Dora Dixon-File, but we can't do it until the next meeting, can we?
That's fine.
Yeah.
So currently, the agreed places are as stands for the Standard Subcommittee, Councillor Shitu as the chair, Councillor Nick Johnson, and with 1 open space.
Yeah.
The Civic Awards Subcommittee currently stands as Councillor Hargrove as chair, Councillor Graham Neal, Councillor Margie Newens, and 1 space.
Yes, that's correct.
With Councillor Hargrove as the chair. Are you happy to agree this?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That completes our meeting tonight. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions.